But we're not here today, right, to talk much more about Outbound. We're here today to talk with Mike Black, who is here, hailing over from the Denver marketing firm Paige Black, and who is, going to tell us a little bit more about, what they're doing over there to support companies in their growth. So essentially, he's the CNO and managing partner of the firm, and I'm very curious to learn Mike's perspective on growth and to learn what PageBack is all about. So welcome, Mike.
All right. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So maybe in your own words, what is it that you folks are doing over there? What are you focusing on?
So I guess if you think about our firm, we work with middle market companies. Often they're a B2B firm, so they have a sales team and they have some specific challenges. One of the things that we see really kind of three challenges that they face and we help them fix. And one of them is they've tried all sorts of different ways to approach marketing. Some of it could be digital. How are they building out those pathways on their websites? But they've tried all these things and they really just haven't had success. They have either they haven't done it long enough, they haven't had the right message, or it's just the wrong place. The funniest story that we come up with is that my business partner found a firm that was a funeral parlor that was advertising on Facebook and not getting any traction. Just really not the way to do it. And I mean, that's extreme, but people really do go to the wrong place with the wrong message, and that's a problem. Second one that we run into is they don't know how to talk about their company. They don't know how to explain how their company stands out relative to their competition. I see this in IT all the time. Almost all IT companies say, we take care of your IT so you can run your business. Accounting firms will do that a little bit as well. And that doesn't, if you're saying the same thing as all your competition, then you're not going to stand out. And then what happens is that it drives to a cost driven conversation. So it's the lowest, whatever is going to be the lowest cost, which doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve your clients. It doesn't serve your team. And so we want to help them talk about their company in a better way and explain what really is important to them. The third one is there's some pretty complicated marketing challenges. Maybe they're getting stuck in their funnel. They've got a sales funnel. They can get people to do initial meetings, but for whatever reason, once they get past that initial meeting, people are ghosting them, they're going dark, if they're not closing business, or they're not getting enough leads. It just varies, but we'll go in and figure out, well, what's going on that you're having these problems. And so, yeah, I don't want to go on and on about us, but essentially what happens there is we do a project and we build a custom marketing plan to resolve those challenges.
Very good. You mentioned actually you're focusing on middle market companies there. Can you tell us a little bit more? Like, what is a typical company that you would be working with?
Sure. So, I mean, it varies a little bit. We look at both kind of the personality of the company as well as some of the demographics. So demographics are easier. We're looking for companies that are between 50 to 200, maybe 300 people. After that, they really should have an internal team that does what we do. But under that size, it makes sense for them to hire an outsourced team, because to hire an internal team will actually cost them more. And then they have ad spend on top of that. So we can be pretty cost effective for them. Then they'll have a sales team that they typically engage in complicated sales. In other words, there's multiple decision makers. They're having to make multiple contacts. There's a lot of visits or sales calls, and they have to negotiate all of that to close business. And so that's where we tend to play in that area. Personality wise, it's a little bit different. One of our qualifiers is, do we look forward to meetings with them? Because we end up being very collaborative, and we end up having a lot of meetings. And if it's miserable and we're not looking forward to it, they're probably not looking forward to it. It's not going to be a successful engagement. And so we will probably say no if that's the case. And they really shouldn't hire us at that point, because no one's going to be happy at that point.
Who would be the champion though within those companies? You mentioned obviously, at a later stage they're building up those teams. Is there still like, a CMO or head of growth, or who do you typically, collaborate with?
So at that stage in the B2B, so if you go into the SaaS space, we don't spend a lot of time in SaaS, which I think is a little bit of your target market, but we tend to be more in straight B2B, and they don't often have a CMO. They might have a VP of marketing and sales, and usually that's a person who's really good salesperson that should then therefore know marketing. We actually can add a ton of value. We're very sales friendly. We love talking to salespeople and helping them. And so they can become a champion, and it can go the other direction. Often the CEO, what I hear from CEOs is they're not seeing a strategic approach to their marketing, that it's very tactical. They're trying certain things and there's these serial attempts, but there's a bigger approach that looks at, okay, here's where we are. Here's where we want to be. These are the firms or the types of firms we want to target. Here's our plan to make that happen. And so then they'll begin to champion us and sell. It's funny. There's $100 million company where the CEO is now championing us to go in, and he's convincing his VP of sales and marketing that he needs to bring it. They need to bring us on. That's just funny to me, but that's the nature of sales and business today.
Gotcha. Maybe you could just to give us, those folks who are maybe not so familiar with the business structure that you're working with, like what would be the types of tasks that you would be taking on for them? Like, or where would you support them? Or, is it on a strategic level? Is it an execution level? Is it, building websites? Is it building outbound campaigns? Like, how do you fit in?
It's a little bit, I hate to be the like word, we do everything, and we don't do everything, but what we do is we start off where I talked about those challenges where they don't know how to talk about themselves. We actually conduct market research to figure out, well, we go talk to their best clients, ask them questions like, why did you hire them? Why do you like working with them? Is there anything they could do to blow it? Is there something more that they could be doing for you? What's the value you're getting about this? And how do you make these decisions? Kind of getting into that customer journey, more offline. Some of that's offline, not online, but what are the important factors when you're making this decision? And so based on all of that data, we start to understand what's important to them. Then we do some competitive research, looking at their competitors and saying, hey, this is how their competitors talk about. We don't want to look and sound just like your best competition. We want to be different. Between the two of those, we triangulate a little bit and come up with a way to position them and then build a plan to get into their market, the target markets that they want to get into. Once we've done that project, then there's usually a list of things that need to happen. So if your website says something totally different than what your target market wants to see, then there's a website project. If it doesn't, then great, there's not. But so then there's some projects, and we then often serve as an outsourced marketing team where we'll execute on that then, but not always. Sometimes we're not the right fit. Maybe there's some specific expertise that we don't have, or they have an internal team that could execute fine. Then they will do that themselves.
Okay, that gives a really well-rounded picture. What I'm always curious to ask, business leaders is, how they're actually thinking about the growth for their own company. Like, what is the journey that somebody, goes through in order to get to know you folks, so they get started with Paige Black? Like, what would be the channels that you guys leveraging?
So, I mean, we're pretty heavy into LinkedIn. We do some LinkedIn lives. We've got one coming up on Tuesday. This probably won't be published by then, so we won't even talk about it. We also do webinars every month, and very educational webinars. And they're not one of the things, like, I really appreciate you doing the podcast because, and talking about other companies. There's probably some educational components to this. We spend a lot of time educating our target market around like, hey, this is what marketing should look like. And often, in the lower and middle markets, there's not a big strategic approach. It's very much, they try things that they hear are good. The CEO hears that SEO, we were just talking offline about SEO and how backlinks are important. Well, they hear about that, they try it. Turns out in their market, it's not important and it's not the way to go. And then they waste a bunch of money. So that's, that's the path. We often will do an offer on the webinar where we'll do some free work, do some consulting, helping them understand where they sit in the market space today. And if they want, we'll continue a conversation and may turn into business, may not.
We're getting sometimes requests from the listeners too, because what I really love to understand is what types of business are driven by outbound, what are driven by, who is driven by inbound? Like, how does it look like for you guys? Is there like a split? Do you focus heavy on one or the other side? Like, what's your take on that?
So I'll tell, my perspective is honestly, it's a little bit of, for us, it's a lot of both, but it is for every company, it should be a little bit of both. And the example, I don't want to misquote. There's a sales guru. He's really good. And I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but one of his points is that if they know your brand, they're so much more likely to take the call, because he's a big cold caller. This sales guru is a big cold caller, and I'm not a cold caller, but I respect people that do that. And I think it's a hard thing. And he was talking about how they'll just take your call. They're more likely. So we were talking about Google, and I joke often about Google. And if Google calls or Mike Black calls, who are you more likely to take the call from? And I'm going to take the call from Google, and I'm me, right? And that's because they have a good brand. And so that, I think it really comes back to both. You've got both. You want to build the inbound, but also build that brand awareness. So it just makes everybody's job easier. And it really is about that integrated approach where you're doing all of the above. And then you have really solid strategic messaging that you're using across all those channels so that people understand where you sit and how they benefit from engaging you. The issue comes, and this is probably good for your listeners to know, the issue that I see companies struggle with is that salespeople, being smart, will know how to close a deal with specific people. And then they start to see that message resonates. Well, maybe that's not quite the message that the company should give. And then another salesperson saying something that's slightly different. And the marketing team is saying something slightly different. And now no one has any idea why this company stands out. And when the salesperson says it, they go to the website says something totally different. And it's that, that's where the not having a unified message really can hurt a company and it'll slow their growth.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Super interesting. Thanks a lot for that insight and transparency. One thing we talk a little bit about in the podcast is obviously websites. We love websites. We talk with people who love building websites. Maybe just a brief one. Like, what role does your Paige.Black website play for you guys?
It's critical for us. It's funny that, we're a small firm, but our website actually has, we're closing on 50,000 words at this point. And it's because we believe in content marketing. We believe in good content, and we publish good content. We update our pages regularly. We publish content regularly. And so it's critical for us. And I think it's critical, even though we really leverage it at this stage of our growth. We're not as well known. We're building that brand awareness. So not lots of people are going to come to us from SEO or because they know our name yet, but they do go to our website and they can see some depth. They can see that we take what we do seriously. And the example I can give you is we're talking to a pretty large accounting firm, 500 people, 500 accountants. And they started talking to companies about doing their website. And we are one of the companies they're going to talk to. And the comment I got that I love is that, any company that didn't have a good website themselves, we just rolled them out immediately, because if they can't do their own marketing, how can they help us? And so it really plays this almost social proof that we can do what we say we can do, because we've got a hefty, serious website. So people take us more seriously. We had a previous brand with a different website and it wasn't as good. We just, it's really hard as a marketing company to market yourself because you're so busy marketing your clients. So we didn't, and we've had to take the time to do it. So it's been really helpful to us from that perspective.
Very good. I love that you don't lean in the cobbler's shoes example. I just hear that very often.
Oh, sorry. Say that. You broke up for me.
I'm just loving that you don't lean too heavy into the cobbler's shoes example, right?
Because trying really hard not to. We spend a lot of time and money on that, but yes.
Awesome. Really, really good. Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit, right? I would love to talk a little bit more, generically about marketing, right? Because you are seeing a lot of different situations there. I would be curious, what comes to mind when I ask you, what do you consider is actually the biggest challenge in bringing innovation into marketing today?
The biggest challenge for innovation, in some ways, I think it is all of the tech that is out there. I mean, there's I can't remember the name of the website, but they kind of track all of the different tech services that are out there. And it's something like 6,000 or 10,000 companies now have a SaaS or some sort of product that's out there to help. And they're all I think they're probably all there with this idea of we're going to solve a problem for companies, that there's a use case for them. In most cases, the problem is, as a business owner, is if I'm thinking about that, how do I keep up? Not to mention that the tech space around what Google, we've talked about Google a little bit, what Google is doing differently. LinkedIn is changing things constantly. I used to be 6 months ago, I got 10 requests a day to connect, almost immediately followed by this kind of hey, let's meet, I can help you. And they have no idea if I actually need their help at all. Right. And so LinkedIn's tapped down on that because I don't get that as much. I get 1 or 2 a week now. So either I'm doing a bad job on my marketing and we're not getting out there. I don't believe that's the case, but could be, or they've really tapped down. And I think that's it, because it's really harming the experience of being on LinkedIn. So I think a part of the challenge, I think if when you say innovating, I'm thinking from a business owner's perspective, how do I innovate in my own marketing? Really the challenge I see them face is, how do I keep up with all these changes? I can't keep up with them. And I spend a lot of time in the space. Beyond that, I don't know if you think about innovate in marketing. Well, in marketing, your goal is always going to be, how do I get in front of the right people that are making a decision? If that's in a B2C, so meaning kind of a consumer driven, maybe it's a auto dealership that wants people to buy their cars, to a SaaS product where you've got a B2B, you're looking to get more leads to sale, like what you guys do, which is really cool. Interesting is that you're looking at, how do we leverage automation? How do we leverage AI to go ahead to get more leads off of the traffic you already have? Well, that's obviously really powerful. And so these things are all about how the tech changes, but people don't change. And so I think it's interesting that you have to keep up with the technology and you have to spend far more time on that. Yet we lose the value. We have a harder time understanding that people are still making these decisions and how do we have the right conversations with the right people. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, but those are kind of my initial riffs on that question.
I think you did. I think you did. I think you're hitting a very, very crucial point. There's just a lot to choose from, but you need to progress efficiently, right? So,
That's right.
very good. Maybe one more question in that direction. Like we talked, you actually brought up the website there a couple of minutes ago, and the traffic that is already there. Where do you see the challenge in conversion optimization? You're probably seeing a lot of cases where the traffic is there. Like where do you see the challenge typically?
Boy, is that a variety. I mean, it could be anything really. So if you're looking at it your first question, let's talk about like, if you're not getting leads, essentially is the challenge. Well, the first question you have to ask, is it the right companies? Are the right people going to my website? To some degree, are they real people or is it a bot? But more likely, is it the right people? Have I attracted that right audience? And so some verification there. And that could be on the paid space. So if you're in AdWords, you can start looking at what's going on in the AdWords account to determine whether or not it's the right people. And that's a really good test for that, even if you're not going to use AdWords overall. If it's a search-driven campaign, start with AdWords, figure out, can we get the right audience there? Can we get conversions? I think that's a challenge. The other piece I think, and this is a part of what we do. So of course I think that's important, but if you don't understand your target market's real desires and you're just guessing, you're going to spend, even with a great tool like you guys have, you're going to spend time trying to figure out, well, what's the right call to action? What's appealing to them, and you're guessing. And the problem with that, and the reason you're guessing is that you have this vision in your head of what that decision maker looks like, what's important to them, and you're not them. And so you lack the right data, in my opinion. I think we're getting closer. And, I think as you look at AI and automation and you're starting to see it, I don't know that you guys do this. I did spend some time on your website, but you're seeing where you can automatically shift calls to action based on previous behavior. You can create a new experience for a website, which is the future. Speaking of innovation and marketing, that will be the future. As you go to a website and the website morphs to answer your questions and your needs based on that website's understanding of you, who you are as a person. And eventually it'll be, you're going to have Google or some bot go out there and look for you and give you 5 options. And then it's going to be morphing to fit that bot's desires. But that's probably a little bit further out than we are today. But I think that's kind of the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see those websites are going to begin to shift. And much like the Google experience is different for everybody's Facebook experience is different for everybody. Individual websites will begin to take that on, in my opinion. So now you have to answer, because I didn't go deep enough on your website. Is that what I know you're not here to talk about you. Is that something you guys are approaching with your product?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's really, taking that intent data, figuring out what people are doing. What is the next step that is likely that they do? Where are they in the journey? And what is that nugget of information attached to whatever call to action that is suitable for that stage in the journey? And that makes a micro experience for those guys then.
Well, then you see, you're already doing what I was predicting. So I'm late. I'm late to the game.
Very good. I mean, what do they say? The future is already there. It's just not equally distributed.
That's well said, because that's exactly right. And we don't know whatever, that's back to that idea that there are so many services. You just can't possibly know what is out there. It's just impossible. So very cool.
Very cool. Let's switch gears. I would love to learn a little bit about your habits of education, because as you mentioned, there's so much stuff out there. How do you filter? Like, what is it that you read? You mentioned LinkedIn a little bit on a side note there, but like, what is it? How do you filter? How do you invest time in content and education for yourself?
Sure. The way I think about it is, what is critical for my role in leading the company in the next 6 months? I love to learn. So I could sit here all day long and we would go out of business, because I wouldn't be one of my key roles in the company is business development. It's out meeting people, doing podcasts like this and getting my name and face in front of people and then initiating conversations. And so that's critical for the company's growth. We don't have another salesperson yet. We have people that support me, but we don't have another outbound salesperson or even just really salesperson yet. And so, but I also have to be learning to make sure that I'm doing the right work and leading the company. And so what I do is I look at, over the next 6 months, these are our strategic initiatives. These are the really critical things that have to be done. What do I need to know to make that happen for the company and to support that and with the company? And so sometimes I'm reading Harvard Business Review to understand what's going on in the world of business to make sure I'm on top of it and what's happening in terms of leadership these days. And
Yeah.
at other times, I spend a lot of time on sales podcasts. We're perfecting the art of conversation and understanding how do I ask better questions, or how do I better qualify people, or, all of those kinds of challenges to make sure that we're really efficient as a sales team. That's probably the mix right now. There's a little bit of project management. We're working on our project management, not my direct role, but I need to understand it from be able to run the company. I need to understand what we're doing. And so I'm doing a little bit of education there as well.
Very good. I want to wrap it up, right? We're coming slowly to an end of the interview. I want to wrap it up with our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
Right. Go ahead.
What's the last book that you read?
I am reading The Ultimate Guide to Link Building. Is sitting on my desk, and it's a guy, Garrett French, who's talking about how link building, because that's one of our internal initiatives that I need to be overseeing and making sure we're doing right.
Awesome. Really good. What's one single thing your company's focused on the most at the moment, maybe aside from link building?
Yeah, no, it's not link building. It would be really understanding the challenges that our clients face and solving those, and being a strategic partner for them.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for your role today?
I would like an automation bot that runs my schedule seamlessly, more than just like a Calendly link.
Mm-hmm. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
Gosh, well, that's pretty constant. I mean, I think I tend to be a worrier, so I'd say that is fairly constant. I spend more than I spend more than my fair share of time just trying to make sure we're in alignment with making sure we're really delivering value to our clients, that we're not just kind of taking orders and just, filling those orders and just doing things without thinking through, is this really going to drive value for them and help them?
Very cool. When you said the word warrior, it just sounded a little bit like warrior as well. It's just too close to each other.
Oh, there we go. Well, I'm going to go with the one that makes me sound stronger.
very, very good. Cool. I want to, very last question would be, if today would actually be your very first day working on the company, right? Is this first time, I don't know, you made that commitment to work on this project and this company. What's the one advice you would give yourself?
Be more early on, I basically spent way too much time driving to coffees and networking with people, and I think I would be more thoughtful with those interviews, that I would really take any call, and I would be more thoughtful and careful with my time. We have, what's the saying about time is the problem with time is you think you have enough.
You don't, unfortunately.
We don't, never do.
Very good, Mike. I really appreciate that you took the time with us today, of your valuable time, to educate us about what you're doing and about your personal journey as well. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about the company, about Paige Black, so what's the one thing that they should remember?
I'll throw out this piece of advice rather than to remember us. My advice is make sure you understand your best clients, ask them important questions, go to lunch with them, make sure you get how you help them, and figure out ways you can help them more.
Okay. Thanks a
lot. If you need help with that, we do that, but there you go.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathfinder Presents today.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.